Thanks a lot, guys, for joining in on the another episode of Beyond Code. Today, I have with me Abdullah, who's here to walk us through the whole journey through which he has actually been moving around, changing faces, changing his roles from a co-founder to an engineering manager, and you never know, he can be a co-founder tomorrow as well. Thanks a lot for Abdullah joining in, and it is a great pleasure to have you today.
Yes, I'm really happy for the opportunity. Yeah, let's get started.
I've not categorically given out what exactly has been your journey. So it's really important that you hear it from your mouth itself. And can you just
Right.
focus and give
Okay.
all the viewers a little bit about what exactly your journey has been so far, and a little bit about that people understand how exactly you've taken multiple steps and multiple career progressions in your career?
Yeah. Okay. So, okay, I'll try to keep this short because there are quite a few things. Uh, so basically, I've been working in the tech industry for it's about 14 years now, and actually, I didn't actually start out my work itself in the tech industry. Actually, I actually remember starting out my actual like paychecks that I used to get was as a graphics designer, like not like a 3D like a visualizer, for example, or spatial effects designer. That's what I kind of started out with. Uh, and then I was actually, to be honest, I at that time, even those softwares, sometimes they would have scripting tools, and I was actually kind of afraid of scripting and programming and all of this stuff. I would always try to like sort of avoid if I could avoid coding, I would actually avoid coding, and because I was just using the graphical like interfaces to like do my thing, right? Especially things for example, things like particle effects or physics effects, etc. You'd kind of have to write some scripts for that, and I would just kind of avoid that. And that's kind of where I started to eventually kind of being here now. So and that was kind of like when I was 14, that's what I was doing. Uh, Later on, basically, in high school, we, it was like a friend and I, we just kind of like decided that, hey, let's, back in the day, the social networks were just still, they were still kind of in their like rising trajectory. Uh, and basically, not all social networks had kind of like stolen each other's features. Like at this time, like basically, okay, you can follow on Facebook, and you can follow on Instagram, and you can follow on LinkedIn, and then and you can have like, again, before there were, you only had like friends on Facebook, and on Twitter you had to you have your followers, etc. So so we like my friend and I decided, hey, why don't we kind of like make something, uh, so we kind of started out like with like a small like website or something, like a social media platform or something, like a social network basically, which was like combining, if I remember correctly, stuff that Facebook had and stuff that Twitter had. So it was like back in 2009, it was like a platform where people could like and dislike and follow and friend, and it had like different layers of privacy. It has like its own like feed, etc. That was kind of where we started. But again, the important thing is coming from like a background where being completely scared to code, to actually even be able to build something like that is something I still kind of look back on. And it was kind of just like an idea was thrown, and we were like, well, we don't like, I don't really know how to code or something. So I was like, let's start with something that was just kind of like a chain of questions mostly. Like, okay, well, I need to build a page. How do I build this page? Okay, I need to build like a sign up form. How do I build this sign up form? What is the like, what language should I use or something? It was just kind of like a string of questions and a little bit of experimenting, uh, and bit by bit, and a lot of like kind of failing a lot. But the only thing that probably kept me going was like an interest in, really much like, very much like an interest in what I was doing. Like that kind of drove me in that, like at that time when we were kind of doing that, even though we had like really no not much hope of any outcome, like financial outcome or anything. It was just kind of doing it for fun. I'll tell you like something interesting later on that happens. Uh, so we kind of built that stuff, that website, and we got I think featured like on a few newspapers or stuff like basically. And eventually, in those series of experiences, what had happened is, knowingly or maybe unknowingly, uh, myself and obviously my friend became quite skilled in developing stuff, right? And we had like actually gone through like a very much like a realistic product development workflow, like basically starting from scratch and actually getting something out there and having it be useful, you know. Needless to say, most of that stuff is like buried now and dead. But basically, that's where we started. The interesting thing started happening when people like started approaching me and were like, "Yeah, we saw your work. Like, how much will you charge for like building X or building Y?" And I was like, charge? Like, what do you mean charge money? Or just do that for, or just do it for fun, you know? Like, you just build stuff, you know? Oh, I had never actually asked money for anything. I was like, oh, nice, you know? People are willing to pay. So, of course, people were willing to pay. I just had no idea, like, how much to actually charge. So, obviously, we knew that, you know, the work we were doing had value. It's just like we were doing it at such a young age, with just so much like passion and energy, that everything that we were learning, etc. Like the moment somebody came in and was like, "Hey, you know, we're like offer you money for this," so I was like, "Okay, this is like." You know, it's like kind of that situation where like, okay, you haven't really gone this far, you know, like, so you don't really know what to do next. So but eventually what kind of happened is we kind of refined our skills a bit more, and kind of formed ourselves into a small team that were just kind of taking you know, client projects. So we'd build like a project for a client, and that's sort of take payments currently. And it was kind of also affordable and cheap for the clients as well, because at that time, obviously, if you wanted to have an app developed or have like a website, or like not just a website, like not just content, like actual uh, like an app or like a social network or something like that be developed, it was still costing like quite like a pretty penny, because people were running it through teams, and we were just like two guys or three guys who just doing this work, you know. So that's where we kind of started out. That was like first 3 or 4 years of my career. And eventually moved on to like do another like app-based startup. And from there on onwards, uh, I think I was in that situation where I kind of got offered my first job, and that's where I kind of like because I had kind of failed more or less like two startups. Like there's the thing that doing like a startup, or like going through your founder journey, is it's never really a waste, especially if you do it in your early years. Like if you were anywhere from 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, that is like super. Like if you do it between, you know, 18 to 20, that is also very nice, because that kind of gives you a head start to basically everybody else in the game. And I didn't realize that till much later, because uh, when I actually went on to get hired, I actually got hired as a senior engineer, rather than being somebody who would be like, for example, junior, for example, starting out at like, I don't know, 20 or 21, for example. So that's where I want to kind of link and chain, and I want to probably feed that into other aspects, which the points that I would like to make is, you know, like, how does your sort of your portfolio and the work that you're doing eventually adds up to give you more confidence in your career. So that's where I kind of started. And I also, during that time, I also kind of got the realization where uh, maybe like being a startup founder was not my thing. And I think when I got into like working professionally, uh, I kind of really liked like position. And because the thing was, I basically discovered that I'm extremely technically minded. Like I have an extremely technical mind and not so much of a business mind, right? Which means which could probably explain why I was flustered when I was offered money. But yeah, anyways. So kind of making that transition, I also like it was kind of like it's a process of self-discovery as well, because from a young age you were kind of seeing like both aspects. Like you've done like the startup and founder thing, you've seen sort of like base product development from there, and then moved on into like a role where you have been hired and you have like a like a company, a support, and you have a boss, or you have employee, like co-workers, etc. So that's another environment that you're kind of getting used to. From then onwards, like it was basically and if you kind of see my career progression, after my first like startup and founder phase, I think changing companies about like around every 18 months or so. Not because I was resigning from those companies and just leaving. I guess it's just being in that eventually, because I was still working for startups, right? And working for startups comes inherently with and mismanagement or whatever. There's a boom bust cycle. For example, they'll grow very fast and go like poof, or something, and then you'll move on to the next one. So that kind of happened a lot in my career, where like the first company I joined, right before like I left it, I think 2 months after that, it just sort of like poof, it shut down. And then the other one had a similar fate, and the one I believe they closed their Dubai offices or something. And after that, I moved to Bangkok. I worked over there for Agoda, came back to Dubai, worked for Property Finder. So again, this kind of like just like a set of progression. Like once you're kind of in that career ladder, you're slowly kind of like making that progression like piece by piece, and eventually getting into. I did have management experience like before, but also more formally transitioning into that in my last few roles, like going into management. So that's kind of my journey. Obviously, there are a lot of challenges and ups and downs and lots of quirks and uh, decision making, whether or not you should or should not make certain decisions. There's a lot of that. So I'll be happy to get into that. But that's like the broad stroke, eventually kind of starting from somebody who's scared to code to engineering manager, I guess.
No, I'm pretty sure, Abdullah. I think there's a lot to learn here. Because as making my own learnings that you put it across, I think one of the important things that you've done is you've done it yourself. Really gone out and really loved the process of building instead of creating that whole impact, right? And to be honest, that's where my second question actually comes down to you, and I wanted to throw that across. Now that you've been in this founder's shoes, you understand that there are certain kind of, and you had a self-discovery of you're more of a tech guy rather than just a business guy. So if someone's going to start right now, right, someone who is of a similar age of yours, what do you think the person should take care while he's trying to become the founder and he predominantly comes from a similar background like yours?
So you mean to ask, for example, somebody who is currently at my age would like to
Yeah.
become a tech founder?
Yeah.
So at least from what I learned, is obviously the degree of risk that's there. You probably need to evaluate that first before anything. I did all of this stuff where I basically had nothing to lose, uh, like because I didn't have anything, so there was nothing to lose, right? uh, but again, like I would probably again there everybody has a different like appetite for risk, and as I have progressed, my appetite for risk has updated. But for example, now if once you're married, you have kids, etc., you will have a different appetite for risk, for example, or if you have like a running mortgage, etc. So these are things I would say before even tech founder or not tech founder, probably think about that first, is your appetite for risk, what that is. And the second thing, at least what I figured, was your co-founders. I think if you're gonna pick a co-founder, uh, I think there has to be like a very good alignment over there. The only reason I was able to get, and we were able to build like quite a few really good things, is because I had like a really good alignment with whoever. Like my friend was, and he was also my co-founder, and so that alignment like is probably extremely important, because we used to work like clockwork, like literally clockwork. Like it was just kind of like a seesaw, for example. Like it was like yeah, you're gonna work with your co-founder like a refined, like a machine. So it has to be that sort of relationship to really, I would say, really be successful. The other aspect is, and again, the the situation with co-founders also changes, right? Eventually, like we parted ways. He wanted to do something else, and I decided to do something else. Like we had different ways to go, where obviously we stopped doing what we were doing. So I think uh, sort of having a backup plan for these sort of situations would be quite helpful. And after that, then when you're jumping in, when you figured out, like, again, because you mentioned my age, and people my age would have, again, a different risk appetite. The risk appetite I had 14 years ago, it cannot be compared to what I'm willing to risk today. So one, because otherwise, if you told me, if like a 15, 16 or 17-year-old starting out, like, man, go all in, guns blazing, man. Like, who cares what happens? But obviously, in this scenario, I would probably to sort of like figure out this stuff, and then after that, again, if you're gonna, most likely, you are gonna be the one who's gonna be designing the stuff, or like coding the stuff, because if you're just starting out like with like a POC or like a MVP product or something that's really simple, you got to be ready to really sort of get in, learn the stuff yourself, code the stuff yourself. So you have like a very much like a steep learning curve there. I remember it being quite long and frustrating for me. But then again, that was quite some time ago. Now our resources are like much better than at that time. For example, like uh, I guess people who are even older than me would laugh at this, but when I say, for example, you actually have to ask your own Stack Overflow questions, because not every question had to possibly be answered. So I have like a lot of those. But now, like now, I don't really find myself asking too many questions, because the community has grown so much, the tools have matured. You have like formal training, you have courses, you have so many YouTube channels, you have so many books. Like a lot of stuff is like, our industry has really matured in the last, I would say, 10 years, uh, and into also becoming far more professional than it was, let's say, 10 years ago. So I guess it's probably, from a learning perspective, it is easier. But again, the risk factors and all of those things still apply. That's something that every individual has to sort it out for themselves.
So absolutely, I think it's a journey that everyone takes, and when you look back, you can give better advices, but you can't give better advices looking forward. But yeah,
Yeah,
but very interestingly,
it's the Steve Jobs thing. I think he said something like this.
yeah, connect the dots. Yes.
Yeah.
Wanted to understand, very interestingly, you've mentioned about an interesting state that you mentioned that I last, it's either or around 18 months in a startup, right? And to be honest, you are into a place, you live right now in Dubai, which is considered to be another wave that people expect the whole startup ecosystem to mature in that part of the world, right? So how would you define this 18 months? If I were to ask you that, let's define and decode this 18 months, whatever you would have.
So
What
fine.
would be your
I'll give you my formula. It's pretty simple. Uh, I leave a company when I cannot learn anything there anymore, and I cannot add additional value. So if those two things are true, it is time for me to move. Whether that is 18 months or 2 years, 3 years, whatever that is. That's the rule that I follow, is because you can be in a company for, and I'll give you another, there are a couple of things here you can, which I say, there's really something such as doing 1 year of experience 10 times and get 10 years of experience in your CV, but you've only done 1 year of experience, right? So you want to generally avoid being that person. And I would say keep your mind open for a change, and also keep your eyes open to what you're doing day to day. Is it fulfilling? Are you learning? Are you adding value? And are you yourself valued, right? So these sort of things matter a lot, and that's something that I really because I remember in my early career, I don't know, forgot which company. I remember walking up to my manager and I just go like, why do you pay me? Like, because if you pay me, you need to utilize me, and you need to give me a lot of work, or you need to give me, at least keep me engaged, because I felt that I was not engaged well. And this, I'll add to another point, that resulted in obviously them assigning me like leadership for like a relatively like large, like a decent project, which I took charge of, and then that helped me grow further. I stayed obviously in that company another, I think, 6-7 months, because when I was basically running that project, again, I was helping add value. The aspect of this is, one, you are constantly looking out for, you have your monitors on. You never go on cruise control, or you never go on like an auto mode where you just like day in day out, like you're just doing this, you're never questioning anything. Are you growing? Are you not growing? Are you adding value? Not are you valued or not? If you never ask those questions, very likely you'll end up in that situation where you're doing 1 year of experience 10 times, which is something you don't want to do. And the second thing is speak. You know, uh, I've been very lucky to actually have managers and bosses who have helped me grow, and who have listened, and who have trusted me, and who have given me opportunities. So I would say, again, it's a cliche thing, like it's all over LinkedIn. Oh, pick a boss, like who cares about the company? Pick a boss. It's like, fine. I mean, that's cool. But I actually think the thing is, you can't really pick your boss. It's just like you can't pick your mother, like it's like it's just kind of, you have to keep your eyes open for it and navigate the situation that you're in. There's some aspect of luck here, definitely. But if you could pick your boss, that would be quite interesting. Generally, you don't get to pick your boss, but I've been lucky enough to actually have good people be my manager and bosses, where I was able to identify a slowdown, and then notify them and have some action taken, which allows me to stay like longer in the company. Sometimes, for example, things are fine, but other companies are approaching you because maybe the market rate has changed and they're offering you a higher salary. Instead of just like going like, oh, you just drop your current company and leave, talk to your manager, talk to your boss. Obviously, building that relationship in the process is very important. Building relationship with recruiters, building relationship with your boss, with your colleagues, etc. Again, if you get into like other topics, I will definitely mention the importance of like the emotional intelligence, or if it takes to push your career forward. But that's what I would mention. That's what's behind the 18 months. Part of the 18 months is because the companies just end up failing. No fault of my own. I would have gladly stayed there like longer. Sometimes I change it because of circumstances, like stress or something like that. Like maybe I would internally change like a position within a company. So the other aspect of this, when I said like don't be in cruise control and always monitor yourself, also monitor your health, because these things can get out of hand. So you need to kind of monitor your health as well. So I actually took a 5-month career break between my current job and my previous job. So I would say, yeah, do focus on, again, you only have a career if you exist, right? So I guess that would be the point.
Absolutely. So I think what you mentioned is absolutely right. And today, the good part is you are boss in your own way. So wanted to understand, today you're an engineering manager, right? So a lot of people would like to pick you as their boss. Now, while they would like you to pick as their boss, what are your focus area? What are you looking at? Someone who's looking to join in your team and make the next move under you. What would be your focus areas for that real person be?
Generally, I think uh, I have a very specific criteria for engineers joining a team. It's a very fresh question as well, because I've just kind of like concluded with building our team as well. Uh, so I actually did hire a lot of engineers recently. The key things I do look for, and I think a lot of the interviews I did were for senior engineers, and I didn't ask them to write a single line of code, because once you kind of reach a specific stage, there are other things that you can judge a person with. Uh, and obviously there's the aspect of code writing and everything. You can construct questions in a way where that gets evaluated as well. But I think the most important aspect, at least for me, like if I want to have a team member, is how they approach a specific problem, like their attitude towards a specific problem. A lot of my questions are sort of partially open-ended, so they have a specific answer, but I've had people go like, I've asked them a question and they go like, yeah, I don't know, I'm sorry, which is a relevant response. I highly respect the response. It's good to know that you don't know. That's fine. But I've also had people go like, okay, I don't know this, but let me think, give me a minute. Okay. And you'll ask like a follow-up question, 2 or 3 follow-up questions. They go like, is it like this? Is it like this? And then uh, a lot of times this sort of person will end up explaining and solving the problem in their own words. And they go like, I think blah, blah, blah. Okay, like for example, they have like a longer explanation for this. And I'm go like, okay, yes, that's the answer. This is the word for it. Okay, this is what I was after. So sort of somebody who has an exploratory mind, because that really helps a person succeed, rather than having like more of a dead end approach. Go like, I don't know, obviously I don't know, then what, you know. So, and the other aspects is, again, usually when I'm hiring for usually I'm hiring for like senior engineers, I'm again looking for their ability to manage trade-offs, having like that initiative style, like attitude, positive attitude. And also uh, there's aspect of not knowing. The other aspect of not knowing is probably knowing that you don't know some stuff, solving that problem, yes, but also being humble. Because the last thing I want is somebody uh, who again may or may not be excellent at their work, but is a jerk with the team. Like that's something I really try to avoid as much as possible, and sort of like detect those sort of red flags right away. Because again, we function as a team, and a team is supposed to be supportive with each other. There's like a built culture, and that's supposed to sort of like move forward, right? So again, those are like, I would say, the key aspects. And again, then obviously there's a huge amount of like technical questions and back and forth. That's all technical stuff. That really that's more like that's more mathematical, right? That's like either yes or no, either you know it or you don't know it, right? But attitude is always a scale, right? And culture fit is, but sometimes actually culture fit is mathematical as well, because you can kind of pick out from like a few questions whether or not this person is a culture fit or not. Uh, Culture fit also doesn't mean if you have a shitty culture that this person is supposed to have that same mindset. If this person is gonna bring like a better culture, please get this guy in. Again, this is assuming this is assuming that again, this is probably hopefully it's not a bad assumption, but given that we assume that our culture is good, we would like to have a culture fit into that culture. If our culture is bad, obviously I want something better, somebody who can come in and advise to improve that sort of culture, right? Again, but the base of that culture still needs to be that it accepts improvement, right? So yeah, those are, I guess, the things, the main things, or even I would say the things where I would actually not have somebody on my team, right? If they failed any of those categories. Other than that, again, people have their own approach to things. They're always welcome. So
So you interestingly made a very important statement here that you work as a team, right? And there would have been days where you would have a lot of challenges being thrown at you. And wanted to understand if you can walk us through what was your way to address those projects which really came out really challenging, and how exactly did you lead the team then? What was your expectations from the folks who were reporting you, and how did you handle yourself?
so generally, whenever this sort of like a what we call like a challenging project comes around, right? Uh, and usually, obviously, there are many players in whenever there is like a project like that. Again, we're talking in the context of working within a team or within a company, and that, let's say, for example, that company has an investor meeting coming up. For example, they want to develop a certain set of feature before the investor meeting, or for example, they are having like a specific event they want to, again. So the first aspect of the challenge usually comes from a time frame, like a time constraint, right? So you can have multiple types of complexity or challenge, right? You can have a project with like actual like complexity of the project is high, but the time frame is longer, so you can probably manage that more easily. And otherwise, you could have like a relatively simple project, but the timeline is short. Or you could have it the worst of all cases, where it is a complex project and a tight deadline. So how do you address that sort of situation, right? So I've kind of been in all of those sort of situations. Usually, what I try to do, the first thing I do is get an agreement on the time expectations. Really set those time expectations up front with the stakeholders, whether they are the founders of a company, or whoever else is having in this a stake in the success of this project. So once we sort of set that line, uh, then we can go into refining the project management of a specific thing, right? uh, because if you don't have a deadline in mind, it's very elastic. Like it's the work kind of will fill that gap if you have like a bigger timeline. So usually after setting that, usually I would go into very much like an aggressive planning with my team, something that's extremely interactive, where like we'll go in depth and really break down like what the problem is, understand the complexities, what we need from who, all of these things would be mentioned and listed. And after that, and a very important aspect that has made things extremely sort of these sort of projects like very successful is, as a manager, your job is designing interfaces, not interfaces between classes, interfaces between departments, and interfaces between your team members. Especially when a project is extremely challenging or there's a timeline that is tough. What you want to do is you want to reduce the number of decisions each individual team member has to make at any given time, and the amount of external interaction each team member will have at any given time. So as a team lead or a manager, the facilitation role that you would be playing in that sort of situation in order to achieve, I would say, in practice, what I've seen where projects have been successful, is as part of the planning phase, you clearly define scopes that each person will handle. And you make sure that there is a clear coordination, because usually what you want to do in a lot of these sort of projects, especially when there's a time constraint, is you want to move as many work streams in parallel as possible. You want to move work for different streams in parallel as much as possible, without creating like a dependency or stacking effect where one thing needs to complete and then the next thing needs to complete and the next thing needs to complete. Ideally, what you want to do is you want to have multiple streams of work merge into a result. So that's where kind of like where the problem solving is mostly happening in these sort of projects, where for each team member, you are helping them decide that, okay, this is your scope of work. Once your scope of work is done, uh, you only need to have these interfaces ready, or you only need to have these front-end components ready, or these pages ready, and you will build up to this point. This is only a scope. You don't have to worry about anything else. Just deliver on this and have them be the owner of that area. Then the other person will build another aspect and build up till that connection point, right? That way, it's sort of like to run those multiple execution streams, right? And the other aspect is setting interface boundaries between your team, your department, and other departments. So making sure that nobody can sort of like directly grab one of your engineers and send them off to another different tangent, right? So you control the flow of work, tasks, concerns, fires, everything that's coming is funneled and it's appropriately managed before the engineers gets exposed to this sort of thing. So and again, a lot of this has to do with having, again, once you've set those, you're having like regular check-ins, you're having milestones, you're checking in with your engineers to make sure like things are going fine. If they're not, what are the decisions that you're going to make sure they keep moving forward, right? You get stuck in a problem, you have to make those decisions, right? Like, so you kind of have to have like a plan B in mind if things go sideways. So the other aspect of this is risk assessment. Now, what we also do in this sort of approaches is whenever we have a project, again, with a time frame, the first thing we'll do is we'll mention the unknowns, right? Okay, so for example, if you're integrating with a third-party service that we don't know, we haven't worked with before, or there's a new framework we haven't worked with before, first thing what you ideally want to do is you want to mitigate your risk first. Because always in a project you have the unknowns that you know, and then you have the aspect of things that you're familiar with, and then you have the worst of the worst, which is the unknown unknowns, right? The stuff that you don't know, you know. So that maybe you don't have too much control over. That's something you can only get control over by absolute experience. Like, for example, if you have like a senior member in the team or a mentor or somebody else who has interacted with like building similar systems, they might be aware of those unknown unknowns that your team might not be aware of. But at least within our domain of control, the approach would be of that of risk mitigation, where you would identify the points of things that you haven't interacted with yet, and you would front weight that. You would address those first. Once that risk is mitigated, then the rest of the work is basically falls into your regular work category, right? The ones that you can estimate easily. Okay, I want to build a page, it has this forms, it has these integration with the APIs, regular stuff that we do day to day. Okay, but we have to integrate this third-party service. That's something new. That's something you're going to attack first. And what we're going to do is, for example, in that sort of situation, we'll go create like a POC for that first. So we'll go study it, make sure it works, and then we'll just kind of put it on the side. Okay, risk is mitigated. We build the stuff, and then we bring in this the new service, and then we integrate it. That kind of like allows us to front weight the risk. So in case things go wrong, the last thing you want to do is address your high risk item towards the end of your deadline. The risk of being burned being extremely high. So again, those are like, again, some project management and dependency management techniques that they're obviously a lot I can go into. There are actually books on this stuff. So, but they're on a high level. This is probably how, if you wanted, let's say, like a little bit more detailed breakdown on, if you're gonna give me like a crazy ass project with like a deadline. And also, one other thing I do, I a lot of times I'll throw a lot of the process out of the window. So if you give me an extremely strict deadline, for something, and we know we have to deliver within that, I'll create like a special bubble workflow for that starts today and ends at the deadline, where certain rituals and certain things will just kind of hyper optimize that workflow for that delivery. And once that delivery is done, we will go back to, usually, like software cycles are like, or you have the sprints, you have the 2 week sprints, you have this, you have the retros, you have the rituals. A lot of the times, if I am given like a tough project, I would actually uh, uh, get rid of a lot of the rituals and like redesign that workflow to hyper optimize that sort of delivery and quality on that delivery, and then revert back to a normal function again. uh, I assume that would be part of agile, right? Otherwise, uh,
So obviously, I think challenging processes do basically help us create a lot more modern, as you mentioned, some kind of hyper customized approaches as well. But while the challenging projects are still there, and I think you'll get something or the other coming from your team, but there's a larger challenge that the tech industry right now looks at. Right, there are new upcoming technologies that are out there in the market, so-called the future of this particular industry that you have. What's your way? How do you, for example, see the whole tech industry evolve? And to be honest, what's the most exciting part for you at this point of time?
I think what's probably exciting and a little bit concerning maybe for the younger crowd, I guess. Uh, so again, like when I was working, a lot of this stuff, we were working with, we didn't have a lot of these mature frameworks. For example, React hadn't come around. I think Angular was starting to come around. React hadn't come around. A lot of the other frameworks hadn't come around. A lot of the backend stuff was already present. Obviously, the backend has always been like a lot more mature, but on the front end side, those things weren't there so much. I can on the iOS front, it was Objective C, Swift like came in recently, right? So and also like Kotlin on the Android front. Uh, and then now you have like this stuff like coming around, which is like GitHub Copilot and stuff like that, where it's kind of like helping you do some like code stuff, etc. So I think going forward, the only thing I would think of is to probably not lose touch with the basics and the core, right? And that's probably important for people who are coming into the industry new, and that's where, for example, things like this AI driven code or something that could actually, the last thing you want is probably a junior kind of like relying on these sort of things, and then when things go sort of like sideways, they never really delved in too much and they get stuck again. This is like a hyper situation of what we kind of see sometimes with specialized frameworks such as React or etc. You end up finding React engineers or React developers, uh, like, so people are going directly and doing like React boot camps, etc. So that's all well and good, and that'll get you into the door. But I do believe, like, to move forward, you must reconnect with the base. The whatever the base language is, understand how the language works, understand how that language behaves, how it compiles, how it is executed, to have and I personally took that journey like myself, extremely helpful, obviously, to move forward into the career, regardless of all of the new stuff that's coming around. uh and yeah, that would be kind of like my approach to new things coming around. I'm extremely skeptical because I've seen a lot of things come and go. I've seen a lot of companies and teams get burnt by the new and shiny, and they'll do the new and shiny, and then they realize there's like these entire set of like use cases, and then you have these broad blog posts like, oh, we moved our entire code base to X, and then 6 months later we're moving our entire code back to Y, like, and the internet is full of these sort of like tragedies, so so you kind of, that kind of makes you as a senior engineer, the more at least you move into your career, a bit more skeptical towards, oh, where the industry is moving, and all of this new stuff. Awesome, fine. Have a very empirical approach to everything, with a trade-off based mindset, with an understanding of like limitations, obviously understanding, probably let other people take the fall first, let them get burnt, and then come and you do your thing. That's what I've learned personally. Again, it's a bit violent, but hey, it's worked for me.
Got it. Interesting, Abdullah. While you mentioned about people moving from code A to code B, and a lot of aspirations right now, which is now being developed to people moving to the place that you live in, the whole area of Gulf, I think. So there's a lot of aspirations that have built up. People want to work for teams based out of Gulf. Even a lot of them want to go back. So what's your advice you would give out to people looking to move and really settle down, or at least work for companies who are based out of UAE? What would be your 2 cents that you'd like to add?
So I would say nothing that I would say is very specific to the UAE, because those sort of like key aspects of being having a specific skill set, being valuable, and refining your skill set to a point where your value is realized, is, again, it's not just for UAE, it's for anywhere, right? Like, so what I've at least seen in the UAE happen in the last 10 years is at least with the a lot of the industry that I interact with, is a move towards maturity, a maturity of technologies, maturity of practices, maturity of process. So looking back, a lot of these things weren't there. Like, things were a lot hodgepodge, like like if you look back, like having like proper CI processes, testing processes, a lot of these things were not that mature like back then. And now, obviously, I'm seeing that a lot of the industry has actually matured a lot. And then again, this has to do with the great talent that has obviously moved here in the first place, that has again, you have like companies such as you have Kareem, you have Talabat, you have really large companies here functioning, which Amazon, obviously, which actually bring in different cultures and that sort of like practice and knowledge, which I felt it was extremely lacking. I remember working in 2013, 14, in relative like good sized companies, but like now there's like that degree of maturity here. So I would think refining those sort of skills is extremely valuable. It's not just like, and again, this is not just for the UAE, it is for anywhere, like you. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of the thing. I mean, I'm probably usually the worst person to ask for like job search advice sort of thing, is because I've never actually gone through that procedure, because I went through like a very specific personal journey where I didn't actually have to look for jobs because of this trajectory that I followed. So usually I end up being possibly the worst person to ask this sort of question. But what I have seen success with is a couple of things. It depends on, I think you probably need to specify your question further. So like, who is it targeted for? Is it targeted for somebody who is already 10 years into their career, or somebody who's maybe 2 years into their career, right? So
Ideally, 2 years is what we look at. Yeah, 2 to 3 years in the career.
yeah, so that advice is actually much different for somebody than who is 10 years, right? So again, for somebody who's 10 years, you'll probably see what their weaknesses are, tell them, okay, please address these weaknesses, and also focus a lot on your CV, etc. Like, you please get it into like a format that would be easily understandable, digestible, right? For somebody who's 1 or 2 years into their career, and I just want to really link that to initially what I mentioned about the startup stuff. You don't really need to do a startup to actually build something. You can, again, blessing that we have is we can work from anywhere and we can start anything for free, right? And we can start any project for free. Like we just need a computer and a keyboard, right? So that's the beauty of our industry. But again, with that, I would say when somebody who's 1 or 2 years in, usually their biggest challenge is even uni grads. It's like they have it the worst, to be honest, because it's just kind of like chicken and egg situation where a lot of them find themselves in. So at least from my experience, the biggest advice that I usually give is um, build a project, like build your portfolio, have something to show, something to show. So when the interviewer talks to you, you have code to show, you have to show something that works, uh, and I would say people early in their career, don't be worried. Like there's a there's a huge amount of negativity around working for free. I practically work for free for like I don't know how long, till eventually eventually I started getting paid at a senior level, right? But there was the cheat code where I directly went to a senior level, but there was the aspect of me being as in the founder role is not really having any salary specifically, right? So but because that period really helps, what you're doing is you're investing in yourself, right? uh, and when I say sort of like check what the responsibility and the work is, if it's an internship or whatever that is, like if it's even if it's like low paying at that time, fine, it's okay, do it. I've taken a pay cut actually to learn. I've actually taken significant pay cut in my career just so that I can go learn and then come back even stronger, right? So it's fine. I would say that's what I would advise, like new people, sort of like either moving forward into their careers. And again, that's about the UAE. You want to go to Europe, you want to go to Southeast Asia, anywhere, all of this is still relevant, right? uh, is And I also run mentorships, right? And a lot of these questions come up, and my advice is always, what do you have to show? Right? Because if you can show, you've actually answered a lot of questions. I don't need to ask you a lot of questions if you simply have something to show, right? And you've kind of got a head start from being able to deliver no value to be able to prove that you can deliver value, right? So I would say that's the most important aspect, and after that comes in your, okay, how you design your CV, etc. The other thing that I would extremely I would say recommend for people starting out, which is something I've done extremely religiously. Recruiters are your friends. Okay, recruiters are your biggest friends, whether you need a job or you don't need a job. Recruiters are your biggest friends. And also I've also learned, I'm sure this is like this, I've read that this somewhere, your network is your net worth.
True.
so so
Yeah.
so that's extremely important. So for example, I get approached a lot by different recruiters, or people who just want help, or people who just want to talk, or people who just want some mentorship, etc. For example, in case of a recruiter, I'm at my job, but he brings me like some opportunity. I always reply to them. I always tell them what my current situation is. I always tell them when I might be looking in the future, and I always connect with them. Okay, I do these 4 things whenever a new recruiter, somebody else, or founder, or somebody else who's going to approach me. Even if I am busy, I am working, I am employed, these are the 4 things that I do. I am kind, I reply to them, I try to tell them what is my current situation, and then that I feel that whether or not their opportunity is good, what I think about it, and when I might be looking in the future. And I always connect with them, right? So hey, let's connect, for the future or whatever. That helps you sort of like one by one, you compound that over 10 years, you compound that over 10 years, you'll have like it will come to life, that statement, your network is your net worth, because you eventually get to a point where you may not really have to apply for jobs, right? Because you have a network where people know you, they know you from your work, they know you from your mentorship, they know you from, you were contacted this, so they know maybe when you're getting free, or so yeah, I think that's extremely important. Whether it's recruiters, anybody is coming to you for help or something, be nice, be kind. If somebody is coming to you for asking for like a job or something, reply. If you don't have a job, just say you don't have a job, and just be kind. It goes a long way. And also, there's another rule that I follow. Is for me, money has mostly been secondary, and I've seen the more money has been secondary, the more it has come around without too much effort, right? So, and I've always valued a good connection, a good network, and a good relationship over money. So I remember when I first got hired, I had a certain salary that I agreed, and I had worked about a month, and I had built some prototype for this company. And right towards the end of the month, another company approached me with more than double the salary. So I told my current guys, well, it was like right when I was starting out, basically they were more than doubling my salary. I was like, okay, look, this is the case. And they were like, okay, you've already like work a month, so this is what your salary is. I was like, I don't need it. I don't need it. You keep that. Okay, I don't need that, because first of all, I'm leaving early. Okay, like this, and obviously you gave me the opportunity. I got a better opportunity, but then again, whatever that case is, I would rather preserve our relationship. I would rather like keep a positive relationship for the future. And I kid you not, 5 or 6 years later, I needed some documents for when I was traveling, or like I believe when I was getting another job, like I think in Thailand. I kid you not, that guy like stamped some papers for me that I needed, that were important for my visa to sort of come in, so I can grab the other job, right? So you don't know when your connection is going to mature. So you have to consistently be nice. Don't always prioritize money. Build your network, uh, and yeah, that's kind of like the rule book that I've worked with. There are very rare circumstances where I've burnt bridges for good reasons. I would rather not go there, but like generally you want to be like in that sort of mindset.
Cool, Abdullah. I think it was great, really hearing it from you. I think the biggest for me, the takeaway that you ended up with is recruiters are your friends. I think developers often, and since I have a lot of friends in recruiters, they often say that developers do not respond to their chit chats even. So I think that's a challenge that it's out and loud for people to understand that it's important that you make your network. And it's good to hear that even developers today that you've mentioned, you've been it, you've done it, and you're really proud of the network that you've built it, and you understand the importance of it. So I think this message is loud and clear for all our viewers who join us. Thanks a lot for joining in. It was honestly really pleasure learning from you, and really a lot of takeaways that we have from this whole session. Uh, Anything you would have in terms of your parting notes?
Yeah, so I think since your audience would be again people who are maybe looking into making a change into management, or maybe new people coming in and becoming more professional engineers, I would recommend maybe like a few books that were extremely, I would say, helpful, and they still form like a lot of the basis for the thought process and the pillars that I have. Is the first one is actually for software engineers. It's there's a popular one called Clean Code from Rob Martin. Not that one. uh, There's one called Clean Coder. So I would recommend that book because I think what it so sometimes this author goes a little bit above and beyond about specifying certain things, but I think even if we did like 50% of that as professionals, I think that would really elevate us. Certain maxims and certain thought process that he discusses in the book are extremely valuable for, like, I would
Yes.
recommend this book to any engineer who's like 2 years in their career and onwards, right? For people looking into what management it looks like, or and again, it's not for everybody. I just want to set that disclaimer out there. It's not for everybody. And I also keep going back and forth from like an IC role manager and an IC role manager, just because sometimes it can be quite overwhelming. The book is called The Manager's Path. I think it's a very valuable book because when I moved into this role, it has a lot of things that I can relate with, and it really specifies like a lot of the different roles and characteristics that you might find currently in the industry that was like 5 years ago, and probably 5 years ahead as well, if the culture doesn't change much. Like, this book is quite relevant for the manager's path. The other one, if you are a manager, you want to become extremely, I would say, more efficient and more, the book's called like High Output Management by, I believe, Andy Grove, if I'm not mistaken. High Output Management, extremely valuable book. Super, actually. I've read it. I have it as an audiobook. I listen to it like every now and then. The others are, I want to sort of mention two books for extremely important, both for managers and for engineers. And this might seem completely irrelevant and weird, but it's extremely important because we don't just sit and write code. We interact with people. We have negotiations. We have things that we need to address. We have to negotiate our salaries. We have to negotiate our deadlines. Everything. Like, there's a lot of things that we do, and we have to obviously understand other people's problems as well, right? And help them and understand either how to get your way, or also to understand what their situation is. So the two books that I really found helpful is, there's a book called Never Split the Difference, and the other books, I do read it from time to time. It's called Influence: The Psychology of Persuasion. So I would say, like, these are probably the few like top books that I felt were most impactful for me. There are obviously a lot of others, but again, just for the sake of time, we don't want like a giant list. Let's get the hard hitters in first, right?
Awesome. So I think if you have a giant list, post this discussion, you can share that in this, if you have a Notion link or something. We'll be happy to share that across to our viewers, and they can always have a reach out. Before I let you go, Abdullah, can you just tell the easiest way for people to connect with you in case anyone wants to reach out to you?
I guess LinkedIn is probably my best. And you guys are already, I feel you going around my LinkedIn, so I guess you guys can share that link if you
Sure,
need.
we will definitely tag you and share that across. So in case anyone wants to jump in
And
and
also,
really have
please,
a conversation.
anybody listening to this, um, I do mentorship. So there is it's called ADP list. ADP list. So I'm on ADP list. I probably have a link to that, like, on my profile as well. If not, I'll probably add it. But I will share you that link as well. Now, if anybody needs any help, I'm happy. Like, I usually like dedicate like an hour every day, like working days, or a little bit more time like on the weekends, just to I can probably just help out somebody else in the industry.
Sure, I think it really works. Thanks a lot, Abdullah, for joining in. It was a great pleasure to have you.
Yeah, awesome. Likewise.